I arrived at my father's lavish $4 million retirement party with hopes of reconciliation. As I entered the grand ballroom, I overheard guests whispering, "There's the frigid son who can't do anything right." My stepmother approached with security guards and sneered, "Security, remove this useless man." I left silently, drove to my office, and made several urgent calls. I canceled every family-funded account and moved $18 million into a trust. Within minutes, my phone exploded with 56 calls, and my family appeared at my door, desperate and panicking. Growing up as the only son of Robert Wilson meant living in the shadow of greatness. My father built Wilson Enterprises from nothing, transforming it into one of the largest private logistics companies in the Northeast. From my earliest memories, dinner conversations revolved around business strategy and market expansion. While other kids had bedtime stories, I had lessons about compound interest and supply chain management. My mother, Elizabeth, was the balancing force in our home. Where my father was ambitious and demanding, she was patient and nurturing. "Your father pushes because he sees himself in you," she would tell me when I'd come home dejected after failing to meet his expectations. "He just doesn't know how to show his pride any other way." When I was 16, Mom was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The disease took her quickly, leaving a gaping hole in our family. Dad retreated into his work, barely speaking to me for weeks. I processed my grief alone, sitting in her garden each evening, trying to feel her presence among the roses she had lovingly tended. Within minutes, my phone exploded with 56 calls, and my family appeared at my door, desperate and panicking. "We're going to be such good friends, Pete," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "I know I could never replace your mother, but I hope you'll give me a chance to be part of your life." Just 8 months after we buried my mother, Dad introduced me to Jessica Harmon, a 38-year-old former model turned real estate agent who had sold him a vacation property. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding I was informed about rather than invited to participate in. I stood stiffly at the ceremony, still wearing my grief like a second skin, while Jessica beamed triumphantly beside my father. I threw myself into education, earning my finance degree from Penn State before pursuing an MBA at Wharton. Every academic achievement was met with lukewarm acknowledgement from my father and thinly veiled contempt from Jessica. "Another graduation? Don't you think it's time to actually do something instead of hiding in classrooms?" she remarked, when I completed my MBA with honors. My father simply nodded in agreement. What they didn't know was that during my second year of business school, I had quietly begun working at Wilson Enterprises, not under my father's wing, but in the financial analysis department under Marcus Jennings, the company's respected CFO. Marcus recognized my talent immediately, giving me increasingly complex projects that I completed with precision and insight. "You have a natural gift for this, Pete," Marcus told me after I identified a cost-saving measure that would save the company millions annually. "Your father would be proud if he knew." But I asked Marcus to keep my contributions anonymous. I wanted to earn respect on merit, not nepotism, even if it meant working in silence. 3 months ago, the company-wide email arrived announcing my father's retirement at 65. Robert Wilson would be stepping down as CEO, passing the torch to new leadership after 30 years at the helm. The announcement detailed plans for the most extraordinary retirement celebration in company history at the Grand Summit Hotel. My invitation arrived a week later than everyone else's, delivered via email from my father's executive assistant rather than from him personally. No personal note, just the standard invitation text with my name mechanically inserted. Still, I felt a flutter of hope. Major life transitions often created space for healing. Perhaps this milestone would finally allow us to reconnect. I spent weeks considering the perfect gift, eventually commissioning a custom-bound collection of news articles and photographs, documenting my father's business journey, from his first small warehouse to the current corporate headquarters that spanned 3 city blocks. The week before the party, while finalizing some quarterly projections with Marcus, he accidentally left his computer unlocked when called to an emergency meeting. A notification flashed on his screen regarding Wilson ownership transfer documentation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the file. What I discovered stopped my heart. According to company ownership records, Peter Wilson, owned 35% of Wilson Enterprises as of 2 years ago, My 30th birthday. The documents referenced my mother's will and her explicit instruction that her ownership stake be transferred to me when I turned 30. For 2 years, my father and stepmother had concealed this information from me, continuing to treat me as an outsider while I literally owned more than a third of the company. The betrayal was staggering. I immediately sought legal counsel, confirming through my mother's attorney that her will had indeed included this provision. I was not just an employee, but a major shareholder with rights and authority I had never been allowed to exercise. Why wouldn't they tell me? I asked the attorney, struggling to comprehend the deception. Power, he said simply. And perhaps fear of what you might do with that power. For 2 years, my father and stepmother had concealed this information from me, continuing to treat me as an outsider while I literally owned more than a third of the company. The betrayal was staggering. Instead, I walked into a night that would permanently alter the course of our family forever. The Grand Summit Hotel stood illuminated against the night sky, its neoclassical facade enhanced by professionally designed lighting that cast dramatic shadows across the columns. Luxury vehicles lined the circular drive, disgorging company executives and business luminaries in formal attire. I adjusted my custom-tailored suit, the one indulgence I had allowed myself despite living well below my means, and handed my car keys to the valet. "Name for the guest list?" asked the hostess at the entrance to the grand ballroom. "Peter Wilson," I replied. I immediately sought legal counsel, confirming through my mother's attorney that her will had indeed included this provision. I was not just an employee, but a major shareholder with rights and authority I had never been allowed to exercise. "That's right. Interesting," she murmured, too quietly for me to be meant to hear it. "You're seated at table 29. I entered the ballroom, momentarily stunned by the extravagance. Crystal chandeliers reflected light onto ice sculptures, depicting the evolution of Wilson Enterprises. A 16-piece orchestra played in one corner, while uniformed staff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Conservative estimates put the cost of this single evening at $4 million money that could have funded our employee scholarship program for a decade. Near the entrance, a 10-foot-tall portrait of my father dominated the wall, surrounded by digital displays showing company milestones. My mother appeared in exactly one photo, tucked into a corner display chronicling the early years. Jessica, by contrast, featured prominently, described as supportive partner through the company's most significant growth period. "Peter Wilson," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Gerald Hoffman, one of our longest-serving board members. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I was invited, Gerald." Of course," he said, his discomfort evident. "Just surprised, given the situation." "What situation would that be?" I asked. Gerald tugged at his collar. "Nothing specific, just company matters." He quickly excused himself, leaving me with more questions. As I moved through the crowd, similar interactions followed. People I'd known for years suddenly found their glasses needing refills or spotted urgent conversations across the room. From fragments of hushed conversations, a disturbing picture emerged. "That's Robert's son, the one who couldn't cut it. Jessica says he's always been jealous of her children. Apparently, he's been refusing to sign some important documents. The frigid son who can't do anything right." I spotted my father at the center of an admiring circle, Jessica clinging to his arm in a designer gown that probably cost more than a company administrative assistant earned in 3 months. Tyler and Amanda flanked them, playing the roles of adoring family to perfection. Working my way toward them, I caught my father's eye. For a brief moment, something like guilt flashed across his face before he returned to his conversation, deliberately turning away. Taking a deep breath, I approached anyway. "Dad," I said, extending my hand. "Congratulations on your retirement." He turned slowly, as if surprised to find me there. "Peter, you came." A statement, not a question or welcome. Of course. "It's an important milestone." Jessica immediately inserted herself between us. "Robert needs to greet the Sanderson Group," she said, not acknowledging me directly. "They're considering that distribution partnership." "I just need 2 minutes," I said. "The family is sitting at the head table," Jessica replied icily. "Which I believe you know isn't where you're assigned." My father remained silent, allowing this dismissal without comment. Before I could respond, they moved away, Jessica orchestrating their path through the crowd to ensure we wouldn't have another chance to speak. I made my way to table 29, located near the kitchen entrance, finding myself seated with administrative staff and two recent hires who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. The printed program on each plate outlined the evening's schedule, culminating in the announcement of new leadership, widely rumored to include promotions for both Tyler and Amanda, despite their lack of qualifications or meaningful contributions to the company. Midway through the mediocre chicken entree, I felt liquid splash across my back. Turning, I found Tyler standing over me, empty wineglass in hand. "Oops," he said with a smirk. "Clumsy me. Red wine on white shirts is a bitch to clean, isn't it?" "Nothing I can't handle," I replied evenly. "Like running a company division?" He snorted. "Dad's finally setting things right, you know. After the official announcement, you'll be answering to me. I might find you a corner office in the basement." I excused myself to the restroom, spending 10 minutes with club soda and paper towels attempting to minimize the stain. When I returned, the formal program had begun, with various executives offering testimonials about my father's business acumen and leadership. I had brought a card containing a handwritten note expressing my genuine respect for his accomplishments. Despite everything, I still admired what he had built. During a break in the speeches, I approached the head table again, card in hand. "I'd like to give you this," I said, extending the envelope. My father began to reach for it when Jessica intercepted, her acrylic nails digging into my wrist. "What is this?" she demanded, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Another one of your passive-aggressive gestures?" "It's just a card, Jessica. Robert doesn't need your insincere congratulations," she said, voice rising further. "Can't you see you're ruining his special night? You've always been jealous that the company is going to Tyler and Amanda instead of you." Heads turned in our direction. My father remained seated, looking increasingly uncomfortable, but making no move to intervene. "That's not true," I said quietly. "I've never asked for anything to be handed to me." "Security!" Jessica suddenly called, gesturing toward the uniformed guards at the ballroom entrance. "This man is harassing the guest of honor." "Jessica," my father finally spoke, "that's unnecessary. He's not invited to the family table, and he's disrupting the event," she insisted. "He's essentially crashing your retirement party." Two security guards approached uncertainly, clearly recognizing me. "Mr. Wilson," one began awkwardly, "perhaps we could remove this useless man from our table," Jessica commanded. "He's been nothing but a disappointment to his father for years. We're celebrating a new chapter tonight, without his negativity." The silence that followed was deafening. Dozens of eyes fixed on me, waiting for an explosion, a scene, any reaction that would confirm the narrative Jessica had crafted about me. Instead, I placed the card on the table, nodded once to my father, whose eyes now refused to meet mine, and said simply, "Congratulations on your retirement. I wish you nothing but the best." With as much dignity as I could muster, I walked out of the ballroom, ignoring the whispers that followed me. In the hotel lobby, my phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. "Emergency. Jessica submitted documents for tomorrow's transition board meeting. They're moving to completely remove your system access and freeze you out of all company assets. Call me as soon as possible." Looking back at the ballroom doors, I made my decision. They had left me no choice. 2 months earlier, the accidental discovery of my ownership stake had sent me into a tailspin of confusion and betrayal. The documented trail was clear. Upon my 30th birthday, 35% of Wilson Enterprises had legally transferred to me according to the provisions in my mother's will. My first call was to Thomas Blackwell, my mother's attorney who had handled her estate. Now in his 70s but sharp as ever, Tom confirmed everything. "Your mother was a brilliant woman," he told me during our confidential meeting in his wood-paneled office. "She knew the business dynamics might change after she was gone, so she protected your inheritance. She specifically structured it this way: your father would maintain control until you were 30, giving you time to mature and gain experience." "But why wouldn't Dad tell me when I turned 30? I asked, still struggling to reconcile the deception. Tom removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. "Has your father's remarriage changed the family dynamics?" The question was diplomatic, but the implication clear. I described Jessica's influence, how she had systematically positioned her children as the future of Wilson Enterprises while marginalizing me. Elizabeth anticipated something like this might happen, Tom said. That's why she made me promise to contact you directly if I hadn't received confirmation of the ownership transfer acknowledgement by your 31st birthday. You tried to reach out to me? Several times. Your contact information kept changing. Emails bounced. Phone calls went unanswered. Quite unusual. His raised eyebrow suggested this was no coincidence. When I contacted your father's office, I was repeatedly told you were traveling or unavailable. The depth of the deception was staggering. I asked Tom about my options, learning that I had significant legal standing not just as a shareholder but as a board member by right of my ownership percentage. You could force the issue immediately, Tom advised. But litigation within families is messy and destructive. Before going nuclear, I suggest gathering information and preparing your position carefully. I took his advice, embarking on a careful campaign of due diligence. During lunches, with longtime employees, I asked casual questions about company history and current operations. In financial review meetings, I requested additional documentation that would give me insight into the company's true condition beyond the polished presentations shared with the broader team. Most valuable was my growing relationship with Jackson Foster, the newly appointed CFO who had replaced Marcus upon his retirement. At 42, Jackson brought fresh perspectives and a commitment to transparency that had already ruffled feathers in the executive suite. The company's fundamentals are strong, Jackson told me over drinks one evening, unaware of my ownership stake. But I'm concerned about some of the expansion decisions being pushed through before your father's retirement. What kind of decisions? Tyler's pet project, that luxury resort development in Aspen? The projections are wildly optimistic, and the financing terms are unfavorable. I've raised red flags, but your father seems determined to give Tyler his big win before stepping down. Similar conversations revealed other troubling patterns. Amanda had been placed in charge of marketing, despite having no background in the field, replacing a talented team leader who had doubled our market presence. Executive compensation packages for Jessica's friends, who had been installed in key positions, were significantly above market rate. Most concerning was the discovery that ownership dilution plans were quietly being prepared. As Jackson explained without realizing the personal implications, there's a complex share restructuring happening post-retirement. Honestly, it feels like someone's trying to protect assets from a potential threat. That threat was me. I spent weekends combing through financial statements and corporate governance documents. I cultivated relationships with key team members who were being sidelined by the new regime, earning their trust through genuine interest in their expertise rather than exploitation of their frustrations. Simultaneously, I began preparing my personal financial position. I consolidated accounts, established a separate legal entity to protect assets, and secured lines of credit that would give me operational flexibility if necessary. Not because I planned to use these resources, but because I needed to be prepared for worst-case scenarios. Throughout this process, I maintained hope that direct conversation might resolve things. I sent my father 3 meeting requests, all declined by his assistant, citing his packed schedule ahead of retirement. I even attempted to reach him at home, only to have Jessica inform me he was unavailable to discuss company matters outside the office. 2 weeks before the retirement party, I had dinner with Marcus, my original mentor who had recently left the company. "I know about your ownership stake," he confessed after our second drink. "I've always known. Why didn't you tell me?" "Professional ethics," he said, "but I've watched how they've treated you, and it isn't right. I brought you into the company because I saw your potential, but also because I promised your mother I'd look out for you." "You knew my mother?" "Elizabeth and I worked together for years before she stepped back to raise you. She was brilliant. The financial architecture of Wilson Enterprises was largely her design, though your father took the credit. She never minded. She said his confidence was what made people follow him, while her strategies were what made them successful. This new perspective on my mother as a business talent in her own right rather than just a supportive spouse shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family. It also explained why she had been so insistent on my business education. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Marcus. "Watch and wait for now. The retirement transition will reveal their true intentions." His expression darkened. "But be prepared for them to try to force you out completely once your father is officially removed from day-to-day operations." Jessica has been consolidating power for years. I left our dinner with a heavy heart but greater clarity. I would attend the retirement party with an open mind, giving my father one final opportunity to acknowledge my position and include me in the company's future. If he continued the pattern of exclusion and dismissal, I would have my answer. The night before the party, I prepared 2 sets of documents with my attorney. The first was a congratulatory letter acknowledging my father's contributions and expressing my desire to honor his legacy through collaborative leadership. The second was a formal assertion of my ownership rights, including the legal mechanisms to protect my interests if necessary. I sincerely hope to deliver only the first. As I laid out my suit for the following evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Peter Wilson?" asked a female voice I didn't recognize. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Diana Chen. I worked in accounting at Wilson Enterprises until last month. We need to talk about some financial irregularities I discovered before they terminated me." "What kind of irregularities?" "Consulting payments to shell companies. Large ones, authorized directly by your stepmother. I think they're embezzling from the company." The final piece clicked into place. The urgency behind the rushed leadership transition, the pressure to sign certain documents, the anxiety about my potential involvement. It wasn't just about control. There was something to hide. I agreed to meet Diana the following morning, adding financial forensics to my growing list of concerns. What had begun as a hope for reconciliation was evolving into something far more complex and consequential. Still, as I fell into restless sleep that night, I clung to the increasingly fragile hope that the retirement party might somehow open a door to honest conversation, rather than forcing my hand toward confrontation. That hope evaporated completely with Jessica's public humiliation and Marcus's urgent text about their plans to remove my access entirely. The drive from the Grand Summit Hotel to the Wilson Enterprises headquarters took 17 minutes. Each passing streetlight illuminated the decisions that had led to this moment: years of dismissal, months of discovery, weeks of preparation, and finally, tonight's public rejection. The security guard at the corporate parking garage nodded respectfully as I pulled in. "Working late?" "Mr. Wilson? Some things can't wait until morning, Frank," I replied, noting the irony that security staff showed me more courtesy than my own family. "I hear the retirement party was something else," Frank commented. "You could say that." The executive floor was deserted at 10:30 p.m., the cleaning crew having finished their nightly rounds. My office, modest compared to Tyler's corner suite despite my generating 10 times the revenue, welcomed me with familiar silence. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and took one deep breath before beginning the sequence of actions I had hoped never to implement. First, I called Thomas Blackwell, activating the legal team we had assembled. "It's time," I said simply. "They're moving to cut me off completely at tomorrow's board meeting. I'll file the injunction immediately and alert the team." "Are you executing the financial protocols as well?" "Yes, all of them." Next came a series of precise financial maneuvers. I logged into the banking portal for the trust we had established, initiating the transfer of $18 million, my personal assets accumulated through prudent investment of my mother's inheritance, and my own salary into protected accounts beyond Jessica's reach. I had discovered 3 months ago that she had somehow gained signatory authority on several of my personal accounts established before her marriage to my father. One by one, I canceled the family credit cards that had been linked to my personal accounts cards I had provided years ago during a brief period when my father and I had attempted reconciliation. Jessica had kept these cards active, using them primarily for her children's extravagant spending. The yacht club membership in Southampton, the lease on Tyler's luxury apartment, the monthly allowance to Amanda's fashion consulting business that had never acquired a single client, all financial ties severed in a series of efficient keystrokes and phone calls. My phone began vibrating incessantly. First Tyler, then Amanda, then Jessica, and finally my father. I silenced it, focusing on the task at hand. A soft knock at my door announced Jackson's arrival. His face was grim as he entered and closed the door behind him. "It's worse than we thought," he said without preamble. "I've been reviewing the documentation for tomorrow's meeting. They're not just removing your system access, they're presenting evidence of supposed financial mismanagement on your part as grounds for termination and potential legal action. Fabricated evidence? Manufactured so convincingly, it would take months to disprove. Backdated approvals, altered financial reports, even emails they've doctored to make it appear you've been negligent or actively working against company interests. My stomach tightened. Did my father sign off on this? Jackson hesitated. The paperwork has his electronic signature, but in my opinion, he may not understand the full extent. Jessica has been controlling what he sees for months, especially as his health has become more fragile. This was news to me. What health issues? Nothing officially disclosed, but he's had several private appointments that coincide with visits to Northeastern Medical Center's cardiology department. The stress of the transition seems to be taking a toll. My phone began vibrating incessantly. First Tyler, then Amanda, then Jessica, and finally my father. I silenced it, focusing on the task at hand. This was news to me. What health issues? Jackson hesitated. The paperwork has his electronic signature, but in my opinion, he may not understand the full extent. Jessica has been controlling what he sees for months, especially as his health has become more fragile. We need to move quickly, Jackson continued. I've prepared documentation of the actual financial state of the company, including the questionable payments Diana Chen flagged before her termination. By midnight, we had assembled a complete briefing package for the board members scheduled to attend tomorrow's transition meeting. I sent secure, time-delayed emails to each member, ensuring they would receive the information 1 hour before the meeting, too late for Jessica to intercept or create a counter-narrative, but early enough for them to review the disturbing evidence. What about your system access? Jackson asked as we finished. I've created a secure backup of everything essential, I assured him. And as of 20 minutes ago, I implemented emergency authentication protocols requiring dual approval for any system changes affecting financial controls. They won't expect that. They've consistently underestimated me, I said. That stops tomorrow. As we wrapped up our preparations, I logged into the family's security system, another account under my name that Jessica had conveniently forgotten. The cameras showed considerable activity at my downtown condo. My father's Mercedes and Jessica's Range Rover were parked haphazardly in the visitor spots, and the lobby camera showed Tyler arguing with the concierge who was explaining that he couldn't provide access to my unit without authorization. Jackson raised an eyebrow at the feed. Where will you stay tonight? I've booked a suite at the Madison under a different name. I need a few hours of clear-headed rest before tomorrow. As we gathered our materials, Jackson paused. Pete, are you sure you want to do this? It will permanently change your relationship with your father. I considered his question carefully. My father changed our relationship years ago. He just never had the courage to tell me directly. Everything since has been pretense and avoidance. At least after tomorrow, we'll have honesty between us, whatever else is lost. Just as we were leaving, my phone displayed a new notification, an alert from the forensic financial team we had quietly engaged. They had completed their analysis of the shell companies receiving Jessica's consulting payments. Good God, Jackson muttered as we reviewed their findings. This isn't just inappropriate use of funds. This is systematic embezzlement with deliberate attempts to conceal the money trail. There could be criminal charges. The realization landed heavily. What had begun as a defense of my rightful place in the company had uncovered something far more serious. Jessica hadn't just been manipulating my father emotionally, she had been stealing from the company founded on his life's work. This changes everything, I said. We need to protect the company first, regardless of family politics. As we rode the elevator down to the parking garage, I felt a strange calm replace the hurt and anger that had driven me earlier. This was no longer about my wounded pride or denied birthright. It was about protecting Wilson Enterprises, its employees, and yes, even my father from those who would exploit and defraud them. The security guard nodded as we left. Have a good night, Mr. Wilson. Thanks, Frank. Tomorrow will be interesting. Life usually is when you least expect it, he replied with the casual wisdom of someone who had seen executives come and go through those doors for decades. As I drove toward the Madison Hotel, my phone continued its silent vibration in my pocket. 56 missed calls, and counting the digital measurement of a family in panic as their carefully constructed world began to crumble. The Madison Hotel suite offered anonymity and distance, both physical and emotional, from the unfolding chaos. I placed my phone on the desk, watching as the screen continuously lit up with notifications. Reading through the messages revealed the progressive stages of family panic. Tyler, 9:45 p.m. What the hell, man? My card just got declined for 10 grand at Lux. Fix it now. Amanda, 9:52 p.m. Pete, the spa said my membership is canceled? This is so embarrassing. Call me back immediately. Jessica, 10:05 p.m. Whatever stunt you're pulling stops now. Your father is furious. Fix the accounts or face consequences. Jessica, 10:17 p.m. You ungrateful little nothing. After everything we've done for you. Tyler, 10:24 p.m. Dude, I'm literally stranded. The Uber account is shut down too? Not cool. My father, 10:36 p.m. Peter, call me immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. Amanda, 9:52 p.m. Pete, the spa said my membership is canceled? This is so embarrassing. Call me back immediately. The tone shifted around 11:30 p.m. as the financial implications began to sink in more deeply. My father, 10:36 p.m. Peter, call me immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. Jessica, 11:27 p.m. Robert is extremely upset. If anything happens to his health over this, it's on your conscience. Amanda, 11:51 p.m. Pete, Mom is freaking out. She's called like every financial person they know. What did you do? And, Pete. Mom is freaking out. The messages continued past midnight, growing increasingly desperate. Jessica, 12:14 a.m. Emergency family meeting at the house. Your attendance is mandatory. This is not a request. Tyler, 12:22 a.m. Dude, it's not just the cards. What happened to all the accounts? Dad's freaking out. I had expected anger, even threats, but the genuine confusion in some of the messages suggested they truly hadn't anticipated my response. Perhaps they had convinced themselves that I would continue to accept their treatment indefinitely, that my patience was weakness rather than calculated restraint. Opening my laptop, I accessed the remote security feed for our family home, another system nominally under my father's name, but which I had administrator access to as I had installed it after a break-in attempt 3 years ago. The feed showed Jessica pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear, while my father sat heavily in his leather armchair, hand occasionally rising to rub his chest in a gesture that sparked concern despite everything. I activated the audio. He can't just do this, Jessica was saying sharply. There must be some financial mechanism to override his actions. An indistinct voice responded through the phone. No, that's not acceptable, she snapped. The transition documents are ready for tomorrow's meeting. Once those are executed, his position becomes irrelevant. We need access to those funds now. My father spoke, his voice weaker than I remembered from just hours earlier at the party. Jessica, perhaps we should Not now, Robert, she cut him off. I'm handling this. She continued her conversation with who I assumed was their personal financial advisor, while Tyler entered the frame, flopping dramatically onto the sofa. This is so messed up, he complained. Cassandra and her friends think I'm some kind of fraud now. My card declined in front of everyone. Your social embarrassment is hardly our priority right now, Jessica replied, covering the phone. We have actual problems to solve. Tyler scrolled through his phone. Holy shit, have you seen this? Jake posted about it on Instagram. Trust fund baby at Tyler Wilson official left stranded at Lux when cards declined. Awkward. There's already 200 comments. Tyler, focus, Jessica snapped. Check your investment account, see if that's been affected too. Your social embarrassment is hardly our priority right now, Jessica replied, covering the phone. We have actual problems to solve. Amanda entered next. Her carefully curated composure noticeably frayed. The car service canceled my account. I had to take an actual taxi home. It smelled like feet. My father finally stood, his movements slow and deliberate. Enough. All of you. This tantrum over canceled credit cards and car services is beneath us. There are more important matters at stake. Like what, Robert? Jessica turned on him. Your precious company? The one you've spent your life building, instead of paying attention to your family? The one that's now in jeopardy because you couldn't control your son? Don't speak about Peter that way, my father said quietly, surprising me. This situation is more complex than you understand. What I understand, Jessica said, advancing on him, is that all our plans are at risk because you've been too weak to handle him properly. I told you years ago to remove him completely, but you insisted on keeping him around out of some misplaced paternal guilt. The raw truth of her statement hung in the air. My father's face reflected a conflict I hadn't witnessed before, something between shame and realization. The meeting tomorrow will resolve this, he said finally. The board will approve the transition plan and will address Peter's concerns afterward. Jessica smiled tightly. Exactly. And once that's done, we'll make sure he understands the consequences of tonight's little power play. They moved to the study, out of camera range, presumably to continue strategizing. I switched off the feed, a strange mixture of emotions churning inside me. The satisfaction of finally taking action was tempered by genuine concern for my father, who seemed physically diminished compared to his commanding presence at the party just hours earlier. At 1:47 a.m., my phone rang with Jackson's number. Sorry for the late call, he said when I answered. But you need to know Jessica's been reaching out to board members directly. She's spinning a story about you having a psychological break, claiming the financial actions are evidence of emotional instability. Are they buying it? Most aren't committing either way. They're waiting to see how things unfold at the meeting. But Davidson and Powell have always been in her corner. They're already suggesting an emergency measure to remove your access pending a psychological evaluation. Noted. Get some rest, Jackson. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. I tried to sleep, but managed only fitful dozing, my mind continuously cycling through scenarios and contingencies. At 3:22 a.m., a new message appeared from an unknown number. Mr. Wilson, this is Nurse Abernathy from Northeastern Medical Center. Your father, Robert Wilson, was just admitted with cardiac symptoms. He's asking for you. I sat bolt upright, immediately calling the hospital to confirm before the notification could fully register. Yes, Robert Wilson had indeed been admitted through the emergency department 40 minutes ago with symptoms consistent with cardiac distress. Yes, he was currently stable. Yes, family could visit. Though outside regular hours, they preferred to limit it to immediate family only. As I dressed quickly, my phone displayed one final message from my father himself. Son, I need to speak with you. Not about business, please. The simple text, devoid of Jessica's influence or corporate politics, cut through everything else. Whatever had transpired between us, whatever mistakes had been made on both sides, some bonds remained unbroken. I left for the hospital immediately, the financial maneuvers and corporate strategy suddenly secondary to a more fundamental concern. For the first time in years, I was going to have an honest conversation with my father, without intermediaries or agendas. The stakes had never been higher, not just for Wilson Enterprises, but for the Wilson family itself. Northeastern Medical Center's cardiac unit maintained the hushed efficiency common to all hospital departments where life and death regularly intersected. The fluorescent lighting cast everyone in the same unflattering pallor, erasing the careful distinctions of wealth and status that had defined our family dynamics for years. At the nurses' station, I identified myself simply as Peter Wilson, Robert Wilson's son. The charge nurse nodded. He's in room 312. Stable but under observation. Mrs. Wilson is with him now. Thank you, I said, steeling myself for the confrontation that would inevitably follow. Outside room 312, I paused at the sound of Jessica's voice, pitched low but intense. You need to focus on recovering, Robert. I've already contacted the board. They're postponing the meeting and implementing emergency protocols given your condition. My father's reply was too quiet to hear. Peter, that's what you're worried about right now? Jessica's voice rose slightly. He's the reason you're in here. The stress he caused with his childish financial tantrum triggered this episode. I'd heard enough. I pushed the door open, causing Jessica to whirl around, her expression transitioning from concern to fury in an instant. You, she hissed. How dare you show your face here after what you've done? My father lay propped up in the hospital bed, monitoring equipment surrounding him, an IV in his arm. He looked smaller somehow. The commanding presence that had dominated boardrooms reduced to an elderly man in a hospital gown. Still, his eyes were alert, and they fixed on me with an intensity that Jessica's interruption couldn't diminish. "I came as soon as I heard," I said, addressing him directly and ignoring Jessica completely. "You're not welcome here," Jessica stepped between us. "In fact, I've instructed security." "Jessica." My father's voice was weak but firm. "I asked him to come." "You're not thinking clearly," she insisted. "The doctors said to avoid stress, and he is nothing but stress right now. I need to speak with my son, alone." Jessica's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. "Robert, that's not advisable given your condition." "It wasn't a suggestion," he replied. A flash of the CEO reasserting itself. "Please give us the room." For a moment, it seemed she might refuse, but hospital protocol, and perhaps the realization that creating a scene would undermine her carefully cultivated image, prevailed. She gathered her designer handbag, pausing beside me on her way out. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You've miscalculated badly." When the door closed behind her, the room fell into silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor. My father gestured weakly toward the chair beside the bed. "Sit down, son." I complied, the familiar formality between us momentarily suspended by the gravity of his condition. "The doctor says it was a stress response," he began. "Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. Apparently, I've been ignoring several warning signs for some time. I didn't know about your health issues." A tired smile crossed his face. "No, you wouldn't have." Jessica thought it best to keep my moments of weakness private. "Image management," she called it. The bitterness in his tone surprised me. "How serious is it?" "Serious enough to get my attention, not serious enough to stop me from fixing what needs to be fixed." He shifted, wincing slightly. "Starting with us." I remained silent, allowing him the space to continue at his own pace. "I received an interesting call tonight from Thomas Blackwell," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "He informed me that certain legal actions had been initiated regarding your ownership stake in Wilson Enterprises." "That's correct. 35%. He stated the figure flatly. "Your mother's shares, transferred on your 30th birthday." "As she intended?" "Yes." "You've known for how long?" 2 months, I answered honestly. He nodded slowly. "And yet you said nothing. You continued working, attending meetings, allowing the retirement plans to proceed. Why?" "I was hoping you would tell me yourself, that at some point you would acknowledge my position in the company, my right to have a voice in its future." My father closed his eyes briefly. "I should have." Those 3 simple words, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of failure, hung between us. "Did you know about Jessica's financial activities?" I asked, needing to understand the full extent of his complicity. "What activities specifically?" "The consulting payments to shell companies, the embezzlement." Genuine shock registered on his face. "What are you talking about?" I explained what Diana Chen had discovered and what our subsequent investigation had confirmed. As I spoke, my father's expression transformed from disbelief to dawning horror. "That's not possible," he said when I finished. "Jessica has been instrumental in our financial strategy. She wouldn't." "The evidence is conclusive, Dad. We have transaction records, account details, even the property connections to her sister in Delaware. It's been happening for at least 18 months." He fell silent, the monitor beside him registering a slight increase in heart rate. After a long moment, he spoke again. "She told me you refused to sign the transition documents because you were jealous of Tyler and Amanda's positions, that you were attempting to sabotage the retirement plan out of spite. I never saw any transition documents. They were deliberately kept from me, just as my own lawyers were apparently instructed to avoid direct contact with you regarding your mother's will provisions." His voice had grown harder. "Jessica told me you had explicitly rejected any interest in the company beyond your current role, that you preferred to remain a background player without leadership responsibilities." Each revelation built upon the last, constructing a comprehensive picture of deception that had isolated both of us within our own family. "Why, Dad?" Why would you believe her over me without ever asking me directly? He stared at his hands, liver spots now prominent on skin that had once seemed impervious to age. Because it was easier. Because after your mother died, I couldn't bear to look at you sometimes. You have her eyes, her way of seeing through pretense. Because Jessica offered simplicity when everything felt complicated. The door opened before I could respond, revealing Jessica with a hospital security officer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson," the officer began uncomfortably, "but Mrs. Wilson has expressed concern about your son's presence causing undue stress." "Officer," my father said clearly, "my son stays. If anyone is causing stress, it's my wife. Please ask her to wait outside." Jessica's carefully applied makeup couldn't conceal her fury. "Robert, you're not thinking clearly. The doctor specifically said." "The doctor said to avoid stress." My father cut her off. "Having discovered that my wife has potentially been embezzling from my company while deliberately alienating me from my son, your presence is considerably more stressful than his." The security officer shifted awkwardly, clearly unprepared for family drama of this magnitude. "Robert!" Jessica gasped. "That's absurd. He's manipulating you. Can't you see that? This is exactly what Elizabeth always did, turn you against anyone who threatened her control." At the mention of my mother, something changed in my father's expression. "Don't you dare speak her name," he said, his voice suddenly stronger. "Not after what I've learned tonight." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Tyler and Amanda, both looking disheveled and anxious. "Dad, the board members are blowing up my phone," Tyler blurted, oblivious to the tension. "They're saying something about Pete freezing company assets? What the hell is going on?" "Language." "Tyler." Jessica snapped automatically, then composed herself. "Your father has had a cardiac event. Peter's irresponsible actions triggered it, and now he's taking advantage of the situation to spread lies." "They're not lies," I said calmly, "and I have documentation to prove it." "What's he talking about, Mom?" Amanda asked, her practiced poise slipping. "Nothing that concerns you," Jessica replied sharply. "Officer, please remove Peter Wilson from this room now." "Wait," my father commanded, his CEO voice momentarily returning. "Peter stays." "Jessica, we will discuss the financial irregularities with the board and proper authorities." "Tyler, Amanda, your future roles at Wilson Enterprises are now under review pending investigation." "What investigation? What is happening?" Tyler demanded, looking between us in confusion. "Your mother has been redirecting company funds to personal accounts," I explained simply, "and has spent years manipulating your father while concealing my legal ownership stake in the company." "That's ridiculous," Amanda scoffed. "Mom would never." "Stop talking, Amanda," Jessica cut her off, her strategy visibly shifting. "Robert, you need to rest. We can address these ridiculous accusations after you've recovered." "There's one more thing," my father said, reaching for the drawer in his bedside table. "Something I should have given Peter years ago." He removed an envelope, yellowed with age. My name written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately as my mother's. "Elizabeth asked me to give you this on your 30th birthday," he said, extending it toward me. "A letter to accompany the ownership transfer. I kept it from you. Another failure I need to make right." Jessica lunged forward, attempting to intercept the letter, but the security officer, now fully engaged in the unfolding drama, stepped between us, allowing me to take the envelope from my father's hand. "This is a family matter," Jessica protested. "And Peter is family," my father replied firmly. "My son, Elizabeth's son, the rightful heir to 35% of Wilson Enterprises. Something I promised his mother on her deathbed I would protect and honor." The revelation silenced even Jessica. The room held its breath as I carefully opened the envelope, unfolding the letter within. My mother's handwriting flowed across the page, a connection to her I hadn't expected to receive after so many years without her. "Read it," my father said softly. "It's time." As I began reading silently, my mother's voice seemed to fill the room, cutting through years of manipulation and misunderstanding with the clarity that had always been her greatest gift. "My dearest Peter," the letter began. "If you're reading this, you've reached your 30th birthday, and with it, inherited my share of the company your father and I built together. This isn't just a financial inheritance, but a legacy of values I hope you'll carry forward." Her words continued. outlining her hopes for my future, her confidence in my abilities, and most surprisingly, her concerns about how her absence might affect the family dynamic. She had seen potential challenges with remarkable clarity, even naming Jessica specifically as someone who had shown concerning interest in your father's assets, rather than his heart, during their brief acquaintance, before my mother's illness progressed. The letter concluded, "Remember that true wealth lies not in bank accounts or company shares, but in integrity, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The ownership I've left you isn't meant as a weapon or a trophy, but as a responsibility to the people whose livelihoods depend on wise leadership. I trust you to be that leader, even if circumstances require you to fight for your place at the table. All my love, always, Mom." I folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope as the room remained silent. When I looked up, my father's eyes were wet with tears he made no attempt to hide. "I broke my promise to her," he said simply. "And to you." Before I could respond, the door opened again, admitting Jackson and a woman I recognized as Diana Chen, the accountant who had first flagged the suspicious transactions. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Jackson said, taking in the crowded room with a quick glance. "But the board has called an emergency meeting for 9 a.m., given Robert's condition. They're requesting Pete's presence as acting CEO until Robert recovers." "Acting CEO?" Jessica's voice rose to a near shriek. "That's absurd. Tyler is the designated successor. The documents are prepared." "Those documents require board approval," Jackson reminded her calmly. "And given the financial irregularities Ms. Chen has documented, the board has temporarily suspended all leadership transitions pending investigation." Diana stepped forward, addressing my father directly. "Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry about your health situation, but you should know that I've provided the board and the authorities with complete documentation of the unauthorized financial transfers Mrs. Wilson initiated." Jessica's face drained of color. "Robert, don't listen to this. It's a coordinated attack to undermine our family's control of the company." "No, Jessica," my father replied, his voice tired but resolute. "It's the truth finally coming to light. Something that should have happened years ago." He turned to me. "Peter, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after how I've failed you, but will you protect the company while I recover? Not for me, but for your mother's legacy, and for the thousands of people who depend on Wilson Enterprises for their livelihoods." I looked at the man in the hospital bed, not the titan of industry I had spent my life trying to impress, but a fallible, aging father who had made terrible mistakes but was finally attempting to correct them. Despite everything, I found my answer came easily. "Yes, I'll make sure the company is secure and properly managed. And when you're recovered, we can discuss the future leadership structure together." Jessica made one final desperate attempt. "This is a coup. Robert, he's taking advantage of your weakness to seize control." "The only person who has taken advantage of anyone is you," my father replied. "Officer, please escort my wife and her children from the room. I need to rest and to speak further with my son." As they were led out, Jessica's mask of sophisticated control crumbled completely. "You'll regret this, both of you." When the door closed behind them, leaving just my father, Jackson, Diana, and myself, the tension in the room dissipated like fog. Under morning Sunday, "I have a lot to make up for," my father said simply. "Yes," I agreed. "You do. But right now, focus on getting well. We have time to address the rest." For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I saw my father nod in genuine respect for my judgment. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The Wilson Enterprises boardroom had witnessed countless pivotal moments in the company's 30-year history, but few as consequential as the emergency meeting called that morning. 14 board members sat around the polished mahogany table, expressions ranging from concern to barely disguised fascination with the unfolding family drama. I took my seat at the head of the table, a position I had never occupied before. Jackson sat to my right, Diana Chen to my left, each with meticulously organized documentation before them. "Thank you all for assembling on such short notice," I began. "As you're aware, my father experienced a cardiac event last night and is currently under medical observation. The doctors expect a full recovery with proper rest and treatment. but he has requested that I temporarily assume operational leadership of Wilson Enterprises during his convalescence. Gerald Hoffman, the longest-serving board member, leaned forward. Before we proceed, I believe we need to address the elephant in the room. Mrs. Wilson has made serious allegations about financial irregularities and what she terms a hostile takeover attempt. I'm prepared to address those concerns comprehensively, I replied. Miss Chen, please distribute the financial documentation packages. Diana efficiently handed folders to each board member. What you're receiving is a complete audit trail of unauthorized financial transfers from Wilson Enterprises to 3 LLC entities over the past 18 months. All 3 entities trace back to property owned by Elaine Harmon, Jessica Wilson's sister. The total unauthorized transfers amount to $2.7 million, Jackson added, directing attention to the relevant spreadsheets. None of these transfers received proper authorization through our standard financial controls, though they were processed with electronic signature credentials assigned to Robert Wilson. Stunned silence fell as the board members reviewed the evidence. Additionally, I continued, you'll find documentation of my 35% ownership stake in Wilson Enterprises transferred to me on my 30th birthday. According to the legally executed will of Elizabeth Wilson, my mother and co-founder of this company. Martin Davidson, one of Jessica's strongest allies on the board, looked up sharply. If this ownership transfer occurred 2 years ago, why are we only hearing about it now? Because it was deliberately concealed from me, I answered evenly. As the additional documentation demonstrates, multiple attempts by my mother's attorney to contact me regarding this inheritance were intercepted and blocked. I discovered my ownership stake accidentally only 2 months ago. The revelations continued for nearly an hour, with Jackson and Diana methodically walking the board through the evidence of financial misconduct, deliberate information, suppression, and the systematic marginalization of proper corporate governance. When we concluded, Gerald Hoffman removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. These are extraordinarily serious matters. If even half of what you've presented is accurate, we're looking at potential criminal charges. My focus is on stabilizing the company and protecting its future, I responded. The authorities have been provided with the relevant financial documentation regarding the embezzlement. How they proceed is their jurisdiction. My responsibility is to this company, its employees, and its shareholders. What about the leadership transition plan? Asked Diane Powell. The retirement announcement specified Tyler Wilson as the designated CEO successor. That plan was developed without consultation with a major shareholder, me, and without proper vetting of the candidate's qualifications, I explained. Tyler Wilson has been with the company for less than 3 years, has no significant business education, and has yet to successfully complete a single major project. His appointment would have been detrimental to company interests and shareholder value. After extensive discussion, the board voted unanimously to appoint me as acting CEO during my father's recovery period, with a comprehensive leadership review to follow. They also approved immediate implementation of enhanced financial controls and a freeze on all non-essential expenditures pending complete audit. As the meeting concluded, Gerald approached me privately. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "She always said you had her head for business and your father's determination. A powerful combination." The following weeks unfolded in a blur of activity. With Jackson's support, I implemented proper financial oversight mechanisms that should have been in place years earlier. Diana Chen was reinstated with promotion to Senior Financial Compliance Officer, heading a new department specifically tasked with preventing future improprieties. The legal consequences for Jessica developed quickly. Faced with overwhelming evidence, prosecutors filed embezzlement and fraud charges. Released on bail, she retreated to her sister's property in Delaware, issuing periodic statements through her attorney, claiming victimization by corporate politics. Tyler and Amanda faced their own reckonings. With their mother's influence removed and their unearned privileges suspended, they were offered choices: earn legitimate positions through proper qualification and performance, or pursue opportunities elsewhere with modest severance packages. Amanda surprisingly chose to remain, enrolling in business courses and accepting an entry-level position in marketing. Tyler departed noisily, threatening lawsuits that never materialized. My father's recovery progressed steadily. Our conversations during hospital visits remained somewhat stilted but increasingly honest. Decades of emotional distance couldn't be bridged overnight, but small steps accumulated into meaningful progress. "I read some of your financial analysis reports from last year," he mentioned during one visit. "Marcus was right about your talent. The European expansion strategy was particularly insightful." "Thank you," I replied, the simple acknowledgement carrying weight that elaborate praise from anyone else could never match. 3 months after the emergency board meeting, we established the Elizabeth Wilson Foundation for Educational Excellence, providing scholarships for employees' children and supporting business education for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. At the foundation launch event, I spoke briefly about my mother's legacy of integrity and vision qualities that had shaped the company in ways that had gone unacknowledged for too long. As my father's strength returned, our professional relationship evolved into a genuine collaboration. His experience complemented my fresh perspective, creating a leadership dynamic that employees responded to with renewed enthusiasm and commitment. "The company value has increased 18% since the transition," Jackson reported during our quarterly review. "Employee retention has improved, and we've attracted several key talents from competitors. The market is responding positively to the new transparency and governance measures." 6 months after the retirement party disaster, we held a different kind of company gathering, a strategic future event, where my father and I jointly presented our vision for Wilson Enterprises' next chapter. The contrast with the previous lavish spectacle was deliberate, held on company premises, focused on substance over show, with all employees invited rather than just the executive elite. Wilson Enterprises was built on two fundamental principles, my father began, standing beside me at the podium: operational excellence and financial integrity. Recent events revealed that we had strayed from those foundations. Under Peter's leadership, we have returned to them, and the company is stronger for it. The public acknowledgement brought murmurs of approval from the assembled employees, many of whom had witnessed my marginalization over the years. "Moving forward," I continued, "we will be implementing an employee ownership program, allowing everyone who contributes to our success to share in it. This initiative honors the original vision of our co-founders, Robert and Elizabeth Wilson, while positioning us for sustainable growth." The announcement received a standing ovation, with my father joining in despite his usual reserve. Later, at the reception, he approached me with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Doctors still have me avoiding alcohol," he explained, handing me one. "Small price for a functioning heart." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the employees mingle with a sense of optimism that had been missing from company events for years. "I was wrong about so many things," my father finally said. "About Jessica. About the company's direction. Most of all about you. We were both wrong about some things," I replied. "I should have confronted you directly instead of silently proving myself in the background. Your mother would have told us both to stop being so stubborn." A genuine smile crossed his face. "She always said the Wilson men could turn a miscommunication into a decade-long standoff through sheer determination." The following Sunday, I hosted a small dinner at my home. Nothing elaborate, just quality food and meaningful conversation with my father and the key team members who had helped navigate the company through its crisis. As we sat around my dining table, the conversation flowed naturally from business to personal topics and back again, without the artificial barriers that had previously defined our interactions. After dinner, my father lingered as the others departed. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said as we stood on my balcony overlooking the city lights. "That night, at the retirement party, when Jessica had security escort you out, why didn't you reveal your ownership stake right then? It would have been quite the dramatic moment." I considered the question carefully, because it wouldn't have been about the company then. It would have been about humiliating you publicly, winning some petty victory in front of people whose opinions ultimately don't matter. Mom's letter reminded me that ownership isn't about power or status, it's about responsibility. My father nodded slowly. "I've been running from responsibility in my personal life for a long time. Hiding behind work. Then behind Jessica's manipulations. It was easier than facing my failures as a father." "We can't change the past," I said, "but we're both still here. That counts for something." "More than something," he replied, extending his hand. When I took it, he pulled me into an awkward but genuine embrace, our first, in more memory than I could recall. In that moment, standing on my balcony with the father I had spent decades trying to impress, I realized that true success wasn't measured in ownership percentages or corporate titles. It lay in the courage to stand up for yourself while remaining open to reconciliation, in the wisdom to distinguish between justice and vengeance, and in the strength to build something better from the ashes of disappointment. The company would continue to evolve. Our family relationships would require ongoing work, and challenges would inevitably arise. But for the first time in years, I faced the future with neither the desperate need for approval that had once defined me, nor the resentment that had nearly consumed me. Instead, I stood on the solid ground of my own worth, validated not by others' recognition, but by my own integrity and actions. That realization, more than any financial asset or corporate title, was my true inheritance. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family who undervalued you? What helped you find the strength to assert your worth while keeping the door open for healing? Comment below with your experiences. I'd love to hear how you navigated similar challenges in your own life. And if you found value in my story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more authentic life experiences. And share with someone who might need encouragement to claim their rightful place. Thank you for listening. And remember that your worth isn't determined by others' recognition, but by your own integrity and actions.